All right, I'm going to show you a new capability in 4.3. I'm standing for this one, as you can see. This one's pretty geeky. I'm kind of excited about it, around high availability. So we've always had, for the most part, always, I mean, since a long time ago, had high availability in the product. But this is a new way that we're doing it that allows you to share also state and configuration. So I'll kind of walk you through that and then show you how it works. We'll actually set it up and then talk about where we're going with it in the future. But to start, let's talk about the HA that we had, right? Just to kind of frame it. So this is HighByte in 4.3. If you go into settings, we've always had this redundancy. And if you turn it on, what this was doing is saying, hey, this is the primary hub. It's going to ping a secondary hub, right? Or actually, let's flip that around. This would be the secondary hub. It would be pinging a primary hub, and it would be inactive unless those pings failed a certain amount of times, then it would become active. So this works, right? Like it's pretty simple, but the problem is that any kind of state or configuration that's in that other hub does not get synchronized with this hub, meaning when the secondary takes over, it doesn't know the configuration, it doesn't know any of the state, like SQL indexing or other things. So when it picks up, it's kind of fresh. So we left that in the customer hands to figure out how to transfer that configuration and state between instances. Not a super fun task, right? So what we've done is we've kept this redundancy mode for now. At some point, we'll probably deprecate this, but we don't want to break features on customers. So this is still in there for anyone that's using it, but we built a much more robust model of HA that allows you to share state and configuration. And I'll walk you through how that is set up. All right. So to start, we're gonna start clean, right? So this is really valuable in industries like pharmaceutical or other industries where you need reliability, right? So I need a level of redundancy so that if something happens with the primary hub, system goes down, software goes down, something, a secondary hub can pick up, and I limit or sometimes remove the possibility of data loss. So for this demo, it means I need two hubs, right? And the other thing that I need, what will be your friend when you go and set this up, is our user guide has this high availability section that kind of walks you through the setup and how this works. And we're going to use this as part of this setup. The core to this is we're relying on a backend database to help us with synchronization of state and configuration. So the first thing you need when you go through this is you need to install Postgres. So we work with Postgres today. We've built it such that we can extend it to other databases, but right now, release number 1, we're just keeping it simple with Postgres. So in my case, what I've got is I've got Docker installed, and I've just got a Postgres instance running there, and then I've got pgadmin on my desktop that I can connect to that database. You can see I've just called it HighByte HA. So I have my database. Right, so we're assuming that's in there. If you're doing this in Docker, it'll be a lot easier to set up. I'm kind of between Docker and my host here. All right, and then you need 2 instances of HighByte. So if we go into this directory where I'm going to do this demo, I've got my primary instance and my secondary. Now I've already got my primary configured, so I've kind of set up a project, and we'll go look at that because it's going to be important when I demo the failover to see what it's doing. But assume that I've got some configuration in my primary, and like it's not running right now, but it's in a state that I'm like, all right, I'm ready to synchronize this thing and actually go into production. So the first thing you're going to want to do is go into the runtime directory, and you're going to want to open a command shell to do this. Yeah, you're going to want a CD. See, we're getting straight into the geeky stuff. This is cool. You have to run a command to go set up the database with your configuration and state, and that command is here. Right, so I'm going to copy this. I'm going to come in and run it, and it's really, if you look in here, it's a create command. So you can see that here. So we're launching the runtime with a create flag, and here, you need to name this thing uniquely as your primary node. So I just, very boringly, I'm going to call this node 1 primary. And then the other important thing is I need to pass the Postgres connection credentials. Now I can do this with an environment variable. I'm not going to do that as part of this demo, but if I was in production, I'd probably pass an environment variable in here so I'm not leaking passwords and whatnot. But for the purpose of this demo, what I need to do is update this JDBC string to be what I have. So this is going to be my database, which is HighByte HA. And then my default user in Postgres is just Postgres. I didn't change that. And my super secret password, 1234. All right, and then I'm going to hit enter. And what this is going to do is launch HighByte, connect to that database, and seed it with the configuration we need to do HA. And I'm going to go like this again. There it goes. Took it as my first run of the morning, so it's a little slow. And you can see it came in and said HA instance created. So if we launch here, we go and refresh this table, what we'll see, Under schemas, we'll see this orchestration table. So this is a table that we created, and you don't really need to go in here and know what's in here, but if you're curious, there's a cache store, file store, leader lock. So this is where we're tracking like who's the primary hub and what configuration do they have. But what the command I just ran sets that up. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to actually launch the runtime. So I'm going to launch the primary in HA mode, and this is again is a command line argument. And that's this one. So it's very similar to the previous one. The difference is we keep the node ID the same because it's what we used in create, but we call start. Otherwise, it's exactly the same. So rather than copy that, since I've already had it, I'm just going to run this command again and run start. And this is going to launch the hub to read in the configuration from the database and put it in HA mode. So you'll see there, there's some high availability, complete sync, all that kind of messages that come out. And now what this means is we're running with that database as our backend. And here we are. So in here, let's use this as a brief moment to go into what I'm actually doing in this project, and then we're going to launch the secondary in HA mode, and then we'll do an actual failover and see to finish this off and see how it works. So what I'm doing in here is I've got two pipelines. I've got a create data pipeline and a pipeline to UNS. And if you looked at what this is doing is every 5 seconds. I was doing it every 1 second, but when you do the failover, it's kind of hard to see what's going on, so I slowed it down. What it does is it just creates a simple payload for a press machine with a random number, and then it creates a row and inserts it in a SQL table. And if you went and looked at this SQL table, all I'm doing is I'm just stuffing in a primary key that increments over here. So I create the table and then I'm seeding the table. So every 5 seconds I'm writing into it, and I expect this primary key to index. And I'm using SQLite to do this. So this is our counter, right, that we're going to generate. And then if we go back, I'm just taking that every 5 seconds. I'm reading the database and I'm sending it to the UNS. So, and I have an external broker from HighByte that I'm using. So if we launch, actually we don't want to use HighByte because we're going to be failing over the old trusty MQTTFX. If we launch it, what we should see every 5 seconds is this runs and this ID increments by 1, right? And I've made this slow so we can actually see it happen. So this is the primary working. Cool. We now need to launch the secondary, okay? So what we're going to do is go back in. I've got a fresh HighByte install back here that's my secondary. The one thing we need to share between the two is the PKS12 file. So if you go into app data on the primary, you want to copy this PKCS12 file, and you want to paste that into the app data of the secondary, which isn't going to have it because I've never run this yet. This is because this file contains the key that we use to decrypt passwords. So in that configuration of the database are sensitive information like my credentials to the Postgres database, etc., which are encrypted with a key. That key is in this file, right? So we need to share that file with the secondary so when it pulls the configuration down, it can decrypt those passwords as well. And we didn't want to synchronize the keys to the database because that just didn't seem secure enough. There's ways to manage this external to the product, so it's anyway, so you need to share that. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to launch a new command line, and I'm going to go into the secondary, okay, and I'm going to run basically the same command, which I didn't copy. Okay, that's a bummer. What we're going to do is go to the trusty user guide, and here's where we launch the secondary. So I'm going to copy. It's the same start command that I did to launch the primary, and I'm going to paste it again. The big difference is I need to call it something different. So this needs to be a different node in the network. So I'm going to call it node 2 secondary, right? Because I'm pretty boring. But that's in there, and then I need to once again update these with my settings. And again, you would probably in production do this via environment variables. You wouldn't be typing the passwords in command line. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Now when I hit this, it's going to launch the secondary, but the secondary knows through the database that the primary is running, and it's not going to do anything. So it's going to be running, but essentially it's not doing much. And we will see an error on failing to bind to the port because I have these on the same system, and they're trying to bind to the same port, which typically, if I'm doing redundancy, I'm not going to have them on the same system, so this wouldn't be a problem. And that's just the configuration piece when I mean the port binding. So anyway, this is running. So if we go over here, right, we'll see that this is still incrementing, and everything is fine. But we have a redundant pair, and now we have to remember which one is which. I think, yeah, this is secondary. So this is primary. So I'm going to kill the primary. Boom. And what we should see, 179, it should pick up exactly where the next update should be 180 once, 180 once the secondary comes up. So the secondary came up. It has the configuration and the state of where it was in the SQL database, right, from the primary. So it picks up, and it obviously didn't miss a beat here. We saw that it incremented fine, so it was successful failover. Now if we bring the primary back, same thing in reverse. The secondary will go dormant and the primary will come up, and you'll see different. You see the pipeline started on the secondary there. Any moment the primary should spin up here. My machine's just chugging today. And you can see it's taking over. We got some Java deprecation stuff. I just installed JDK 25, so I think there's some stuff coming from there. But you see it starting, and then you can see it just went back into the dormant mode, and we missed it. But if we went through this log here of all these messages, 88, 89, 90, we didn't miss a beat. So we're synchronizing that state. Now, so this is pretty cool, right? Like the really cool part about this is the way we designed it is you can have multiple nodes. So I'm just showing you primary and secondary. You could have a tertiary, I don't know what you'd call it, third, fourth, fifth nodes. And we did this because we're thinking also in the future, how do we horizontally scale certain HighByte workloads? Right now, this is very primitive. It's primary, secondary. The whole workload runs on the primary. Secondary is dormant. But you could see in the future how we could take this and say, well, I actually have 10 instances of HighByte, and I can start to decide which ones are running which workloads based on performance. So how we start to do horizontal scale. We're not committing to that yet because we think a lot of folks that want that don't understand the complexity of it, don't really need it given some of their workloads. But it is, architecturally, we're moving in that direction to support that in the future. The other catch with this is I think I mentioned Postgres is what we're using today. We're just using JDBC, so we've obviously designed it so we can use additional databases. So depending on demand, we'll probably do that. This is much easier to set up in a Docker container and Helm charts and all that. So if you're already in a Docker or Kubernetes environment, this is a lot easier to set up than probably what I showed you here. And the last thing is, it does rely on a SQL database, right? So if you may in your environment want to make the SQL database also fault tolerant, which is doable via that technology. It's one of the reasons we chose it, because it already exists and people are familiar with it. But so this is the new HA. Pretty cool, right? Pretty hands off. So we're synchronizing configuration and state, meaning that SQL index of where I was reading out of that SQL file. So we didn't skip any numbers there between systems. So it's a seamless failover. Anyway, that's new in 4.3. Give it a shot.